Above Valgrind, smoke has swallowed the sky. An empire of steel descends with fire and war. And one reluctant inventor, armed only with his untested creation, is cast into the heart of the Rohari wildlands. What began as survival becomes rebellion. The air above Valgrind had forgotten the color of the sky. Smoke ruled now, thick, unrelenting, curling like fingers across the stratosphere. Below, the bones of mountains have been carved, replaced with steel arteries, railways, forges, and capping mines that spat embers into the heavens. But above it all floated the Iron Gale, one of Oltoria's proudest warships, an airborne fortress of riveted plates, steam hatches, and rotating artillery that groaned with imperial ambition. Within its underdeck, Lionel Thorn sat alone on a crate marked flammable. His fingers worked nervously over the harness of his invention, the airfall cloth, a folding weave of treated canvas and spring-coiled braces, barely tested and utterly dismissed. Around him, Oltorian soldiers, scarred and loud, loaded rifles and laughed at his expense. "Hey, feather boy," barked one with a thick jaw and tattoos up to his neck. "You bring that bedsheet to tuck yourself in at night when the Rohari cut your throat?" Lionel smiled politely but didn't respond. He learned it was better this way. They didn't understand. None of them did. War was not his calling. Equations were. He could still see the chalkboard diagrams from his university days, the parabolic models of drag and descent, the whispered promise of gravity tamed. But those dreams were now beneath the boot of conscription. His skills had now been deemed useful, not for innovation, but for deployment. Above, the warning bell rang. Final approach. Lionel stood, strapped the airfall cloth tightly across his back, and followed the others to the upper deck, where the world burned orange. The Rohari wildlands spread below like a breathing canvas, rolling dunes, jagged ridges, and glimmers of ancient stone architecture, half consumed by nature. No rail lines, no towers, only earth, wind, and resistance. "This is it," the captain barked. "Drop to the flank ridge, quick and quiet, for Oltoria." But silence will never come. A whistle sliced through the air, and then a roar. Flaming projectiles launched by hidden Rohari catapults smashed into the port side. The Iron Gale groaned like a dying animal. Soldiers screamed. Steel twisted. The deck tilted violently. Lionel's hands scrambled for balance, heart pounding. Another impact, then a third. Fire erupted from below. The airship listed hard to starboard. Overhead, the balloon canopy hissed as hot gas vented and flames climbed higher. "Jump, jump," someone screamed. Smoke filled his lungs. Lionel's eyes stung. Through the chaos, he found a clear rail and leapt into the void. Wind tore at his face. Heat licked his boots. He yanked the release cord. The airfall cloth exploded open, jerking him violently upward. For a heartbeat, he thought it had failed. Then, lift. Sudden, buoyant lift. The fire receded above. The ground approached like a question, with no answer. For the first time in his life, Lionel was flying. And then, he saw it. Through the black smoke below, a dozen Rohari scouts, eyes painted in ash, watching his descent in silence, spears in hand. His invention had worked, but now he was alone and falling into the arms of the enemy. When Lionel Thorn opened his eyes, he was no longer falling. The sky above was a quiet of drifting ash and pale sunlight filtering through a canopy of ancient trees. Around him, the airfall cloth lay tangled over a moss-covered altar, its stone edges worn smooth by wind and time. Lionel's ribs ached, his ankle throbbed, and dry blood crusted along a cut above his brow. But he was alive. He pulled himself upright, wincing as the pain reminded him of the impact. The jungle around him was a living thing, chirping, buzzing, breathing, not the silence of Oltorian forges, but a chorus of wilderness that made him feel utterly exposed. The altar intrigued him. Carvings ran its edge in looping natural curves. No straight lines, no corners, as if even their sacred architecture mimicked the flowing lines of the earth. He gently peeled his parachute from the stone, folded it, and tucked it back into his pack with the reverence of someone tending a fallen comrade. He had no map, no compass, no signal beacon, just a broken multi-tool, a cracked lens scope, a few gears from his ruined backpack, and a gut feeling that safety lay northward. For 2 days, Lionel trudged through underbrush and tangled vines. He He filtered stagnant water through a makeshift resin cone, fashioned a walking stick from a twisted root, and tried not to dwell on the distant sounds echoing in the trees. Strange, melodic cries, unlike any creature he had studied. On the second morning, while picking edible bark from a tree's inner ring, he froze. A presence. He turned. There, just beyond a fern's edge, stood a young Rohari boy, no older than 12, eyes wide, a sharpened stick held like a spear. His skin bore streaks of dark clay paint, and he wore loose woven garments dyed in earth tones that blended perfectly with the jungle around him. His arms trembled, but the gaze never left Lionel. Lionel did the only thing he could. He dropped his walking stick, lowered his pack, raised his hands, and slowly sank to his knees. The boy didn't run, he didn't speak either, just vanished back into the jungle like a ghost. But the next day Lionel heard him again, a rustle, a bird call cut short. He was being followed. Lionel chose not to acknowledge it. Instead he built a small camp, using broken lenses to focus light onto dried moss. A spark caught and fire bloomed. He carved a water funnel from bamboo and lined it with waxy leaves, showing how runoff could be purified. He didn't look toward the trees, but he spoke aloud, softly, explaining his methods like a teacher to an unseen class. By the fourth night, the boys stepped into the firelight. They didn't speak the same language, but gestures bridged the gap. The boy he would come to know as Tanu pointed at Lionel's fire starter, then at the stars, then at himself. Lionel offered the device, but Tanu waved it off, curious, not covetous. On the fifth day, Lionel was led, blindfolded and flanked by silent warriors, into a Rohari village nestled within the jungle's cradle. Its huts were carved from trees, walkways suspended by vines, eyes watching from every branch. The council of elders debated in heated voices. One warrior wanted Lionel exiled, another demanded blood. Then Tanu stepped forward. He said a single word, and silence fell. The oldest elder, draped in feathers and bone charms, studied Lionel for a long time. Then he nodded, not a guest, but on probation. The days in the jungle passed not with clocks, but with birdsong and shifting light. Lionel Thorne woke to the sound of rustling leaves and distant river water, his body slowly adjusting to the rhythms of Rohari life. But once felt foreign, air heavy with humidity, footsteps muffled by moss, had become familiar. The Rohari village operated in harmony, not hierarchy. There were no factories, no loud machinery, only the hum of community. Children weaving nets, women crushing herbs, hunters cleaning their tools with reverence. Here, technology existed not in dominance, but in balance. Tanu led him through the forest most days, pointing out signs Lionel never would have seen. An upturned leaf meant an animal had passed. A change in birdsong meant a predator stirred. At night, under firelight and drums, the villagers sang stories into stone, spirals, lines, and hand-carved symbols lined with trunks of sacred trees, living libraries that remembered what time could not. One evening after Lionel shared a diagram with Tanu, an idea for a spiral wind funnel to collect mist as water, an elder named Marak, thin and leathery, sat beside him. "You build clever things," Marak said, tapping the parchment. "But Oltoria builds clever things too." Lionel said nothing. "You build what you do not understand," Marak continued. "Then use it to conquer." Lionel's hands tightened on the drawing. "I didn't come here to destroy, but you came," Marak replied, "and they will come again." The warning came 2 nights later. Thin smoke threading the southern horizon, too dark to be from a cooking fire. Scouts confirmed it. Oltorian advanced units fanning out with heavy boots and barrels of accelerant. Their new strategy wasn't conquest, it was eradication. Burn the forest, smoke the Rohari out. The elders debated fleeing deeper into the jungle. Some wanted to fight, but Lionel stepped forward. "Let me help," he said. "Not with weapons, with warnings." Though wary, they listened. Over the next day, Lionel gathered vines, dry reeds, flexible sapwood, and metal scraps scavenged from the wreck of the iron Gale. With Tanu's help, he fashioned wooden turbines strung with hollow gourds that screamed when the wind blew strong, sounding an alarm miles wide. He built rope-triggered traps that released nets from treetops, ensnaring Oltorian walkers before they could set fire. Using discarded Oltorian gas canisters, he constructed air mines filled with choking pepper spores that dispersed when stepped on, not to kill, but to scatter. Tanu watched everything, every knot, every curve. Lionel no longer taught the boy. They built together. The night before the attack, Lionel stood beneath the trees and stared into the dark. He didn't sleep. The jungle was quiet, but not empty. And when the dawn came, the warning turbines began to wail. The forest had been silent for too long. Now, he was ready to speak. Dawn rose not with birdsong, but with thunder. The air crackled as Oltorian airships tore across the sky, their metal bellies glinting in the rising sun. Smoke from their undercarriage exhaust poured downward, thick and black, trailing like veils of impending death. The sun dimmed behind them, casting long shadows over the Rohari valley. For a moment, the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Then came the first shriek. One of Lionel's turbines, a wooden siren mounted high in the trees, spun wildly, screaming a high-pitched warning that ricocheted through the jungle like a banshee's cry. It was followed by another, then another. The Rohari were ready. Firebombs dropped from the low ship, tumbling in arcs of hissing light. But as they descended, vines sprang to life, snapping taut and launching netted traps into the sky. One bomb burst early, engulfed in flame as it snagged in a woven net. On the ground, the Oltorian soldiers broke through the tree line, only to have the soil erupt beneath them, pepper spores exploding from hidden pods, burning their lungs and blinding their eyes. Chaos unfolded with precision. Lionel Thorn moved not with a weapon, but with purpose. He darted between signal stations, adjusting turbine angles, marking paths for Tanu and the runners. He carried no rifle, no blade, but his tools were sharper. He rerouted enemies through false trails, lined with collapsing vines. He would reroute sirens when their tones grew too familiar, creating new frequencies to destabilize the enemy's communication. Tanu, now nearly Lionel's shadow, signaled Rohari warriors with mirrored flashes. He climbed trees to adjust pressure nets. Together, they moved like a current beneath the canopy. Then a thunderclap. The ground shook. One airship, larger and more armored than the others, pushed through the chaos, descending fast. Its plating bore the crest of the Iron Dominion, Oltoria's elite enforcers. A boarding ramp opened, and out stepped a figure in ceremony black iron, broad-shouldered and cloaked in smoke. Commander Vec. He had been the one who had overseen Lionel's conscription. His voice boomed over a speaker horn. "Lionel Thorn, you disgrace your kingdom. Come out and face justice." The battlefield paused. Lionel emerged from the brush, hands raised, not in surrender, but to draw fire away from the others. Vec snarled and raised his weapon. "You could have built greatness," he spat, approaching, "but you chose dirt and savages." Lionel's breath caught as the barrel aimed at his chest. There was nowhere to run. Behind him, the hill dropped into a ravine. Then light. A sudden blaze of focused fire pierced the clearing. Vec screamed and stumbled, dropping his rifle. He clawed at his eyes, blinded. Tanu stood behind Lionel, holding the fire lens they built together days ago, originally to light fires at dawn. Now it has saved a life. The Rohari surged. Cut off and disoriented, the remaining Oltorians retreated in panic. One airship was grounded by nets. The others rose hastily, chased by arrows and fire. Within minutes, the jungle reclaimed its silence. Smoke lingered, curling upward into the morning sky. But beneath the trees, the forest exhaled. They had defended not just land, but a way of life. And Lionel was no longer a stranger. The battlefield was no longer a place of violence, but a memory. Charred branches curled like skeletal fingers, and the scent of ash still hung heavy in the air. Lionel Thorn moved through the field slowly, each step deliberate. His hands were dark with soot, his fingers nicked and calloused. The tools he had carried into the jungle, once precise and pristine, were now weathered, dented, and stained with earth. But they had served their purpose, and so had he. Above him, the sky was clear, no longer spilled by iron holes or the distant hum of war machines. It was blue and wide, as if exhaling after a long-held breath. The forest had burned in places, yes, but it had not fallen. Roots still held strong, green shoots peeked defiantly from the blackened soil. Nature had survived. The Rohari gathered that evening in the heart of the village, surrounding the great stone where generations had carved their histories. They sang not of victory, but of gratitude. of those who had given their lives to preserve what could not be rebuilt. Smoke rose from incense pots and curved around Lionel's shoulders like mist, not menace. When the songs faded, Elder Marak stepped forward and addressed him, not in the clipped tongue of Oltoria, but in Rohari. Though Lionel did not understand every word, the meaning was clear in Marak's weathered gaze, in the nods of the warriors, in Tanu's proud smile beside him. They were offering him more than safety. They were offering him belonging. Lionel looked down at the scorched remnants of his Oltorian uniform, now no more than rags, and let them fall. In their place he accepted a simple linen tunic, dyed with clay pigments and adorned with a small braid of feathers woven by Tanu himself. He was no longer a guest, no longer a soldier. He was home. The next weeks were filled not with recovery, but renewal. Lionel repurposed the remains of his airfall cloth, stretching its durable canvas as a protective canopy over the village's gathering space. No longer a symbol of descent, it now stood for shelter, for peace. He crafted a vertical windmill built entirely from bamboo and animal sinew that harnessed highland gusts to pull water from deep beneath the roots, irrigating perched soil without disturbing the forest floor. He built signal drums that echoed across the valley, coated with rhythms to warn of storms or welcome travelers, sounds used not to command, but to connect. Tanu became his apprentice, but the learning flowed both ways. While Lionel taught him how to shape airflow, Tanu taught Lionel how to listen. When there was no wind, they walked the forest together, not as foreigner and native, but as family. One afternoon, beneath the shade of the rebuilt canopy, Lionel and Tanu sat in silence. No sirens, no clanging metal, only the rustle of leaves and the breath of a world healing. Lionel gazed at the horizon. Once he had dreamed of changing the world with machines. Now he understood something better. The world didn't need changing, it needed listening, and for the first time, he was ready to hear it.